Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this press conference by Her Excellency the Governor. As usual, the Governor will make some open remarks. We have an hour for the press conference, and after Her Excellency's open remarks, we'll go to the normal questions. So over to the Governor. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And please do excuse me if I cough, because I still have this cough. So hopefully it won't interrupt things. Well, welcome, James. It's good to see you here. We understand that some other members of the media are not available this morning. However, this will go out anyway. And one of the reasons why I like to have these conferences regularly is it gives us a chance to keep up to date and to dialogue. I think this is my 7th press conference since arrival, and I try to hold them about every 6 weeks or so. So even if there's not a lot of news, I'm sure there are things on the minds of the people representing the media. I'll make a few introductory remarks, and then we'll go into a general discussion. So let me say first, I think I want to say very strongly how, like most Montserratians, how shocked and really, quite frankly, disgusted I was to hear about the incursion into the exclusion zone of a boat and tourists a couple of weeks ago. This is not only a violation of law, but the manner in which the people disrespected people's property and personal belongings was truly disgusting. I have spoken with the police about what is needed to patrol the area, and there's been a lot said in the public and the media about an adequate police vessel, which is certainly continues to be a concern. Also, people talked about foot patrols, but we do know that this is a vast area, and some of it is quite inaccessible and some of it is very dangerous. So we need to think carefully about this and consider a variety of methods of surveilling that area. Those discussions have been going on for some time about how we can do that effectively, and that includes things like electronic surveillance and so on. Our concern, of course, is also how illegal activity could be taking place in the exclusion zone, including drug and people trafficking. That said, about looking at a number of measures to ensure that we patrol that area, I want to assure you that I'm continuing to make the strong case for funding a marine security capacity, including a security vessel. So while we're on the subject of protecting Montserrat, we should remember that some of the threat to this beautiful island comes from within. In this case, I am referring to the continuous wanton disregard for the environment by those who continue to toss and tip their rubbish here and there. Our pristine environment is a treasure for Montserratians and visitors. Why are we so careless when it comes to our own personal responsibility to carefully and appropriately dispose of our rubbish? Why are our roads and public and private places still blighted by rusting metal appliances and vehicles that are not only unsightly and dangerous, but also potential breeding spaces for the mosquitoes, especially the Aedes aegypti, which carry dengue, chikungunya, and Zika? Please, people, if you love Montserrat, respect the place and dispose of your garbage appropriately. I'd also like to say a few words about the celebration of the Queen's birthday this year. As you know, this year is especially important because it celebrates the Queen's 90th year. Some of you will know I hosted a delightful event on the 21st of April, the actual birthday date of the Queen's birthday, with a number of Montserratians who turned 90 or will turn 90 this year. We had a wonderful time with song, skits, and laughter. But I also want to make sure that Montserratians generally know that this year, the Queen's birthday parade, which takes place at the Salem Cricket Field, will be held on Monday, the 13th of June, which is a holiday, rather than the Saturday before. And that's a change from when we usually hold it. This change is to allow for a greater number of participants to be part of the march than had been possible before. As well, the actual evening event or party will also take place on the evening that same day, June the 13th. A few months back, I decided that I wanted to make the event more of a celebration of the diversity of Montserrat. So we are working with a number of community groups to make sure that they have a visible presence at the party, which has not always been the case in the past. Because this year, for the party, we will have some people invited who haven't been invited in the past. It does mean that some people who have come before will not receive an invitation this year. So I just want to put that out there. And I'm sorry about that. If I had my way, I'd invite every single person on Montserrat to the party, but we all know that that is neither practical nor affordable. But I'm sure that these people will understand and support the notion that we need to make our celebrations diverse and inclusive. And they will be pleased that this means that someone new has a chance to come to the party this year. I will continue, of course, to open up the residents to a number of events throughout the year to ensure a wide cross-section have the opportunity to attend events at Government House. And then finally, a really important message is that we're moving into the hurricane season. That officially begins the 1st of June. Really, that's just in a couple of weeks. The governor and DFID's office have already carried out a test of our business continuity arrangements, and I do encourage all government offices and businesses to do the same. We learned a lot from that exercise about how ready we are and how our response systems and mechanisms work, and it's always good to practice them. While the government with the Disaster Management Coordination Agency, DMCA, and others gear up to ensure we are prepared, I want to ask the public, are you prepared? Do you know how to get ready? In the next several weeks, the DMCA and others, including my office, will be putting out announcements and tips on how to get ready and how to be safe. Please listen and heed these messages. I'm told we could be facing a more intense season this year. The fact that we have escaped really serious storms in the last couple of years increases the odds that we are in for something more serious this year. Be informed and be safe, please. And remember, irrespective of what the season forecast says about the number and intensity of storms, it only takes one storm to cause serious damage, as was experienced by our neighbor, Dominica, last year. So that's the end of what I have to say, but let me turn to Tony and Martin to add any further comments and then open this up to questions.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I'll just pick up, if I may, just on your last remarks about the hurricane season. As probably everyone knows, we put out a press release yesterday about the disaster management seminar which takes place in Miami next week, which Billy Dower, Director of Disaster Management, Martin Dawson sitting next to me, and I will be attending. And that's one of our key meetings to make sure we're prepared, not just for the hurricane season, but for all the hazards that the territories face. Just also a quick word about the cancellation of the visit by HMS Mersey a few weeks ago. She was to have visited from the 25th to the 28th of April, but we were told about 4 days before she arrived that she wouldn't be able to make it because en route from Antigua to BVI, she hit a whale and broke the propeller. So those repairs have only just been effected, and she's only just putting out to sea again this weekend. So we won't be seeing HMS Mersey now during her current deployment, which ends in July. But we expect to see her replacement later in the year. That's all I wish to say at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks.
Your Excellency, you opened with the whole issue of security, border security. And I note that there's been a meeting in Jamaica, a regional meeting of security personnel, and they were looking at a number of areas where they can assist each other. And one of the key things that came out of it was the whole idea of a single Caribbean island not being able to deal with security, border security on its own. And they were looking at collaboration. How can we piggyback or get some support from the region to assist us with our border security?
Well, I will say a little bit about that, and Tony, you might want to add something. First of all, the overseas territories do assist each other, and of course we do get assistance from the UK. The ship that Tony was mentioning not only looks at security in terms of disasters, but also looks at drug security as well, and does some patrolling of the area and borders. But I think that point is very well taken. A lot of the countries or islands in the Caribbean are small, and they don't have the capacity to mount a full sort of security array, whether it's marine or otherwise. So cooperation in the region has always been a focus. But if there's efforts being taken to strengthen that, I think that's a really good direction to go in. Tony, you may have some comments on that.
Thanks. I'll just make just a couple of points. Firstly, I must admit I wasn't aware of a meeting in Jamaica. However, there has been this week a meeting of the Association of Caribbean Chiefs of Police in Suriname, which our commissioner was at, as were all the other chiefs of police from all the other Caribbean islands and territories. And that's also attended by Larry Covington, the OT's law enforcement advisor. So a lot of discussions about these things go on there. Secondly, there is a really, really good network of cooperation around the Caribbean between all the islands through the ACCP structure, but also the US, the Dutch, the French, and the British through the Royal Navy. They are all their activities are coordinated through what's called Joint Interagency Task Force South, based in Key West. And so all the counter-drugs, counter-narcotics, illegal migration and trafficking, the activities that take place are all coordinated by that body in Key West, and there is an awful lot of work that goes on. So, for instance, last week we had here the US Coast Guard cutter, and there was some work that went on here under the shipwrighter agreement with local enforcement agencies. I mean, there's always more that you can do, but within the current structure, I think that everything that can be done is being done.
Okay, Your Excellency, just to bring it a little closer home, the whole issue with the Shamrock, what's the situation with that? I know that the whole issue of security is high on your agenda. Just speak to us in terms of what is being discussed, the dialogue in terms of getting a fit-for-purpose vessel.
Sure. Well, I think this discussion has been going on for some years before I got here, and it's not an easy one. But the Shamrock, bless her, has been in service for 14 years, and that's a long time for a vessel that is at sea and undergoing the kind of exposure that a vessel like that gets. So she was overhauled, I understand, a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. This recent event, the hole in the hull, as I understand it, and forgive me, I'm not a marine engineer or anything like that, but my understanding is that that hole, in order to repair it substantially, would have required dismantling the boat to some extent. And so you go into these discussions about cost-benefit. What it has managed to happen now is there's a patch on it, and the boat is seaworthy to the extent that it's not doing sort of, massive excursions here and there. But it's not seaworthy, and it's probably not fit for purpose for what we need in terms of marine security. So there's more than a boat that deals with marine security. It's trained personnel, it's having the right vessel, the right asset, and having the ability of the people who man or operate that vessel to have these skills and so on. So acquiring a new vessel is definitely the objective. It's something that we've talked about. It's something that I have articulated to the funders, and I'm pushing very hard for it. I don't have an answer yet, and I've said this again and again, but I think there is a growing realization, and it's not just DFID, because DFID isn't necessarily the funder for this kind of thing, but there is a growing realization that for the overseas territories, having appropriate marine security assets is important, particularly from the point of view of protecting sort of sovereignty, protecting the waters, protecting against criminals, drugs, certainly people trafficking and that sort of thing. So I think there's a growing realization of that, and I hope that us making the case this time will get some response.
Did you mention, Your Excellency, a patch is, if we are to have an emergency situation, that vessel with the patch that you mentioned, I don't know how this will stand up at sea.
Yeah.
And you spoke also of support, the OTs supporting each other. Is there any way? Because I'm very uneasy with this patch that you spoke of.
I think we all are, and let's not go down the road of making technical comments about this, because I certainly am not conversant in what that means technically. However, the overseas territories have supported each other in the past. One of the short-term things, because even if tomorrow we heard, okay, you've got the funding, go ahead and go through the procurement process for a vessel, it would be some time before we had a vessel. So in the meantime, we are looking, I know the police commissioner really is the one to be talking to this, because he has been approaching our neighbors about temporary borrowing of boats or assignment of boats to Montserrat. And we do need to find that kind of stopgap solution as well. So we're definitely working on that. And, one of the things we should be looking at is, because we see a vessel sometimes here as a solution to all of our problems. But what kind of vessel and what kind of problems is really, really key. Because if we got a larger vessel, which was what everybody would love to have, with bells and whistles and so on, there are other kinds of incidents where you need a fast response with a smaller vessel. So in our discussions about what technically is needed, we're also thinking about, should we have a combination of resources in that way? Now, again, I'm not technically on top of this, but it makes sense logically from a common sense point of view that we would be able to respond to different kinds of emergencies, some on the high seas, some going beyond the limits, but also on the rough seas as we go around. And then just fast responses. You don't necessarily want a huge, well-equipped boat to go and ashore when, there's a problem at Woodlands Beach or something like that. So we really need to look at those kinds of things. We are looking at those kinds of things. There is a business case that's been developed that elaborates on those possibilities and needs.
Sorry, if I may just add as well that quite naturally everybody focuses on a new vessel, but as the Governor's sort of alluded to already, it's not just about a new vessel or new vessels. If you're increasing the capability by procuring a big vessel and a smaller vessel, for instance, you need the backup to maintain it, to operate it, to berth it. So we're trying to look at the whole thing in terms of a better equipped police marine unit. So yes, new vessels, but also a better, bigger, better trained marine unit and somewhere to house the vessels, because at the moment the anchoring Shamrock in Little Bay doesn't do the boat any good. It needs to be housed somewhere which is safe, secure and protected. So we're trying to look at the whole thing. Okay,
I know in terms of the berthing and so on, that will take another big discussion, the port development and so on. But Your Excellency, in the meantime, you alluded to there might be illegal activities going on in the unsafe zone. And we also know of the commentary on Facebook about the incident with those folks in there. In the meantime, what do we do in terms of patrolling that area?
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of suggestions made about that. And it's not just for, illegal activities. Things happen in that zone. Tourists are going in there, and things can possibly happen. And that's been a discussion, I think, for some time about how do we make sure that it's safe. We can't patrol the whole place all the time. There's some places that you can't actually walk. You have to reach them by other means. You have to surveil them by helicopter, maybe drones. I don't know, although drones have to be operated within the legal limits that are stipulated here and in other places with regard to proximity to the airport. But there are a number of things. People have suggested CCTV. I don't think that it's practical to think that 24/7 we're going to have foot patrols scanning every part of that area. But, the recent shipwreck, for example, of a small boat in south of Fox's Bay, I think. Yeah.
All the way south, yes.
Yeah. That vessel, the picture that we've seen of that vessel was taken by the MVO helicopter. So the MVO does survey for reasons of monitoring the volcano, but it also picks up other things. When foot patrols do go in there, and I've heard this from the police, is that they have seen some evidence of, people going there, perhaps using it to stash whatever, and so on. And sometimes there's graffiti appearing on things. So then we also have the safety issue of the road going through to the jetty, where the sand miners are taking their sand. So there's a whole lot of things together that need to be considered. It's not just the criminal element, it's protecting those that have to go in there for whatever reason. So again, I think that's under discussion. I don't think there's a clear kind of plan or solution to it. And again, just to emphasize that a vessel isn't the only solution to that either. It can't solve that problem altogether. We need it, no question, but there are other things that need to happen as well.
You did mention a number of measures, and you would have hinted at a few. Let's look at in terms of the vessel at Renishaw. There's not much information on it. It's being very sketchy. I don't know if you've received any additional information on that that you can share with us, or even Tony maybe.
Well, I can share something, although you would need to speak to the police for the details. My understanding is that the person actually had to walk out because of where the shipwreck happened, that they were helped by the police. They were found to be a citizen, I believe, of the U.S., and they've since left and, have been repatriated. So that's all I can say about that. But that person is safe and has left Montserrat.
Okay, we'll follow through with the police.
Yeah, I think
on
that's what you should do.
Okay, Martin, I'm gonna just bring you in at this point, and first of all, just in terms of an update on the third geothermal well, mobilization, preparation for drilling, and so on.
Yes, certainly. Well, things are progressing very well. We obviously, I think, and many of the listeners will also be aware of the progress that's being made actually on the drilling site, and we hope to see in the coming weeks the sort of concrete drilling pad being established there. Mobilisation from Iceland drilling companies going well. We expect we have to make some final decisions with them at the end of this month, by the 31st of May, but it's still looking as though they're planning to be on the island in the third week of July. That may be brought forward slightly, but I think I don't want to preempt that. But if they are able to mobilise a little bit faster, they're going to try. But I would say we're at the moment sticking to the mobilisation of the end of July, the third week of July.
You also spoke of the dredging
Yes.
of Plymouth, the jetty. Where are we on that?
Yeah, well, the tender went out for that, and I understand the contract has been awarded through the Government of Montserrat process. And the plan is obviously the timing is quite critical with the dredging, so we don't want to do it too early. So as I understand it, talking from colleagues from the Government of Montserrat this week, is they're talking to the potential supplier of that contract, just to agree on the timing, which I anticipate would be obviously just 1 or 2 weeks before the arrival of the ship with the drilling rig.
Okay, so 2 questions now from the public, because they've been really calling on us to ask some questions. And the first one is, what system will we be using? Would it be the steam or the binary system? I don't know the difference, so I hope that you're...
Yes, no, I'm probably not the best person to ask on that, James. I mean, my hunch would be probably steam, but I think at this stage, all I can say, I mean, obviously the objective of this part of the program is to drill that third well, which we'd indicate as being either re-injection or potentially a production well. I think the technical aspects of the future is what we're now considering once we've established the resource. So that these sorts of questions will be answered because the experts will be considering, well, if we've got the 3 wells, 2 production and 1 re-injection, what's going to be the configuration as we move to power generation and distribution in the future?
Just the whole issue of re-injection. There's been some concern as to why the third well is called the re-injection well. You know, these technical terms, those are not clear.
Yes, no, it's basically that as this program has developed and as thinking about geothermal production globally has developed as well, is that it makes sense to pump the wastewater from the steam production back into the ground. That's a much better environmentally friendly system than trying to effectively pump it out to sea, as would be the other option, or into the ground. So our feeling is that we've always thought, well, we need to drill another well in order to be able to pump the wastewater back in. But so that's where the re-injection is, re-injecting the water back into the subsurface. But whilst we're planning to do that, we thought, well, let's just see, because the well could be another production well. Why just assume it's got to be for re-injection? Why not test it for production? Because obviously, with all what the experts have been telling us, is that where we're drilling potentially could provide a stronger resource than the other 2 wells that we have. So why don't we explore that? Because why not? That could be, I'd say, I always use the analogy of the golden nugget.
I think that's the reason behind the question, because of its proximity.
Yes.
To the actual volcano.
Yes.
You know, and why a re-injection as, you know, against having that one as one of the major production wells.
That's right. Well, that's a very good point. I think that's why we wanted to have the flexibility and leave it open, is that we'll obviously drill the well and we'll test it just to see if it potentially does have the production, and then we have a choice. Then if it's a stronger production well than either of the other 2, then one of the other 2 would become the re-injection well.
And the other big question, when would residents be able to flip the switch and you have geothermal?
Well, that is
power.
a very big question. As you know, under the government's energy policy, they have an aim to make the island 100% renewable by 2020. You know, I do take risks every now and again and put my neck on the block and say, well, sometimes it doesn't do me very good at all. But I think what we're aiming to achieve, if we possibly can, would be to have geothermal up and running by 2019, 2020 to meet the government's target under the energy policy.
In terms of the new power station.
Yes.
You can provide an update on that as well.
I can, yes. I mean, work's progressing very well on that project, and people would have seen the construction of the house for the power generation unit. I think we're on target to have that all completed and the generator up and running by September. There will then be a period of testing, So that's sort of on target for this year. And obviously we've designed it in such a way that that engine will essentially become potentially the backup generator to geothermal and also the government's consideration of solar power, so that we can actually all link it in together. So that all the technical experts have been working on that. So that is part of the future as well, and will link all the other renewable energy sources through that system as well.
But geothermal will be the base load on the grid.
Yes, it will.
Okay.
That'll be the base load. And for peak loads, I understand, that the solar power generation has so improved over so many years that even solar power can be used for peak loads as well. So it'll be something that will be considered as we move into the next phase with geothermal, so at the base load point, but also how we can link in PV, solar, and obviously the backup generator as well.
In terms now, let's just move a little away from geothermal. Fiber optics, because there's been a lot of discussion, locally in terms of fiber optics and where we are taking into consideration where we want to move to with
Yes.
technology. What's the latest on that?
On fiber optics, this has been a program that we have been focusing on for the last couple of years. Within the process of where I understand things currently are, we are just about we had an early market engagement last year. We just wanted to run a few other questions past some of the potential suppliers we talked to at that event, both here in Montserrat and in the UK. And those questions have been asked now through the DFID portal. So that's the system of procurement that we have. So it's a portal that suppliers can access and see those questions. And all those that register for the EME have access to that. We'll then move in the next few weeks to a pre-qualification questionnaire will be submitted or sent out to suppliers. So those that are interested can complete that questionnaire and return, and then we'll go to full invitations to tender. So I'm hoping we'll be in a position to do that by July, August at the latest, and that'll go through the usual procurement process with an aim to hopefully award a contract sometime in before the end of this financial year.
Just to back up a little bit, Martin, I was just thinking, was going around in my head while we were on geothermal. I know that in terms of the equipment for geothermal, that these are not everyday production in terms of, are we looking at, identifying a supplier of sorts to sort of manufacture these equipment that we will need to use for the geothermal? For
the next stage,
yes,
when we
for
go
the
to
next
power.
stage.
Yes, we are. We'll go through a process of, obviously, once we finish drilling the third well, there'll be a period of testing for the third well, and then we'll consider the configuration of the future power generation unit and how that would look. But that would then go out to tender process for design. Potentially design, build, and operate is one option that could be looked at as the future. But certainly we need the experts to design what it is they think is appropriate to exploit the resource here.
You're in on this, Your Excellency?
Absolutely. I'm aware of some of what Martin is talking about, because we discuss it quite often and the progress. So it's really good to hear that things are moving forward, and I know there are workers on the site, on the geothermal site, and the dredging is about to go ahead. So there's activity happening there.
Okay. And Martin, road rehabilitation, you did mention, maybe not the last time you were here, but prior, you mentioned that there was some work being done in terms of preparation of I think it's a business case that you would have mentioned for the A1 plus other road development. What's the situation there?
Well, yes, you're quite right. Yes, we talked about the A1 roads, and also the quarry is part of that business case as well. So that business case is still under preparation, and we covered some of the immediate road issues under our priority infrastructure project. But our plans, we're sequencing it because we can't do everything at the same time. So I think we're looking at the A1 roads, the bigger roads projects, to sort of come on stream in the next couple of years to do those. But I am conscious of the fact that we operate in a vastly changing environment. So although we have a time frame for that, that can be adjusted. And also because of the quarry element, which I think is quite key to not just the road projects but to a number of other projects, for example, if we were looking at port development. So it may be that we would want to see potentially the quarry development happening quicker if it's more appropriate than if it's a requirement for something else like the port.
Let's look at tourism development, Martin, and we received some statistics from the statistics department in terms of the numbers who were able to visit Montserrat, and well, expectedly, the big numbers came from the ferry. Where are we in terms of the tourism development?
Well, the tourism development plan, the strategy that, and the government can update me possibly on this one, I think has gone to Cabinet or has been considered by not yet.
It's about to be.
About to go to Cabinet. So once the government's agreed its policy and all the work that was done by the consultants toward the end of last year, then we'll have an idea of what their plan is, and then from a DFID point of view, and obviously from the government's point of view, we can then consider, well, what are the options that we should be supporting in the short, medium and long term. So we'll be doing that, and my colleague Hannah Sparenberg will be working on business cases to support that plan.
Okay. Your Excellency?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's look at an update on the financial secretary. The last time you mentioned that there was a selection.
Yes.
And the next step would have been the appointment. Where are we now?
Well, I can't say anything more about it because it's being negotiated at the moment. Hopefully, in the next several days, we should know the direction we're going in.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Tony, disaster management, and I know in terms of the conference in Miami that a number of strategies would be discussed as to how we approach the hurricane season and subsequent seasons. One of my concerns is when we have these meetings, in terms of the discussions and the recommendations that come from these discussions, the implementation, the networking, the sharing of that information so that the action is taken on the ground. Is an effort being made to ensure that these are documented so that each of the OTs would have them to implement?
Absolutely. The conference is now organised by a dedicated disaster management advisor, again based in Miami, who came to this job from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So she has qualification and experience in disaster management through and through. So she works very, very closely, directly, not through me, and that's not necessary either, but with directed disaster management. And one of the things that she's very keen to do is for every territory to become accredited under the Emergency Management Accreditation Program, which is a US accreditation program. And basically what it requires everybody to do is to meet 64 standards in disaster preparedness. And basically to meet those 64 standards, you have to have in place and have the capability to deliver a set of plans. Some territories are further ahead than others in that. Montserrat's got a bit of work to do, but they've already made some progress against that. So she works very closely with them. And my job is basically to support the director here and ensure that UK government preparedness and response is appropriate as well. So a lot of the stuff that goes on every year, the standard stuff that goes on every year at the Miami seminar, is a lot of the best business actually conducted in the margins. Because there's some of the plenary sessions you don't actually get to talk into great detail. So the Royal Navy will be there, the US Coast Guard are there, the French are going to be there, the Dutch are going to be there. As I mentioned earlier about the cooperation in the region on counter-narcotics, the similar cooperation on disaster management. So I'm confident that we come back from that seminar with a whole load of stuff to do. Some of it is immediate to the hurricane season, other stuff is longer term. So things like, you know, planning for tsunamis and the other non-hurricane related hazards.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned all hazards, because it's not only, we tend to focus a lot on just the hurricane season because it's
It's
the
an annual
closest.
event. It's an
Yes,
annual
it's
event.
an annual
Yeah.
event. But in terms of all hazards, and what we would find is that each of the OTs would share their plans, you know, and see how best we can build and network. So I think it's a good idea to have it. Your Excellency, you would like to share on that as well?
Well, just an observation, because the most important thing, I'm talking about hurricane preparedness because we're entering that season. The most important thing about preparedness is being prepared, obviously. And that is one of the really difficult things for human beings who are torn in every which way direction with immediate things, to really focus on preparing for an event that hasn't happened. But that is the essence of it. I think we demonstrated last year when we saw advancing storms that were advancing as hurricanes and then became storms, that we did have a good system, that we were on alert. We met pretty much every day, I think, the emergency group. We were really on top of it. We were looking at the infrastructure. We were looking at actions. We were looking at response. But leading up to that, in between the seasons, is the time of preparedness where departments and so on have to get their plans in order, have to check that everything's in place. Have they got, you know, their procurement thing underway so that they can put their shutters up or repair whatever needs to be repaired. And that is the most difficult thing, because now, as I said in my opening remarks, we haven't had a serious event here for several years. And, you know, there is this degree of, well, you know, we're resilient, we'll know what to do when it happens. But I think all the lessons lead us to conclude that if you don't have the basic things in place, you not only suffer during the event, but the reconstruction or the, you know, getting things back into shape and the recovery part is much, much more difficult. So that is one thing that we work very, very hard on in the government with DMCA and the various departments, on just keeping them now, especially as the season is approaching, very focused on being prepared, fix those things that need fixing and get those things in place.
Well, I think one of the key things we are anticipating, based on the forecast, we're anticipating a much busier season
That's what
this
they
year.
say, yeah.
And let's just look at how important and crucial it is for education to take focus at this time.
True. Education everywhere. So you're talking about even the civil servants themselves who are responsible for their department's preparedness, in the schools, in the communities. You know, that's why I asked the question to the public generally, are you prepared? Do you know what it means to be prepared? And I think people shouldn't hesitate to be in touch with DMCA and so on if they have any doubts about what it means. It also includes taking responsibility for things, you know, that are in your environment that could be zooming around if there are high winds and so on. And there is some reticence sometimes of people doing that.
Yeah, I would just add that last year, in the scheme of things, was a quiet season. We didn't get many storms, and we hardly got any intense storms. But 30 people were killed in Dominica by a tropical storm which produced no wind but vast amounts of rain. And I think a lot of people, not just in Montserrat but around the region, they got very complacent about what a tropical storm was or wasn't and what it could or couldn't do. I think if anybody's learned anything from that last season, is nobody should underestimate the power of a tropical storm.
Yeah. Most times they are more deadly
Yeah, they can be.
than the actual hurricanes, you know. Anyhow, Your Excellency, public sector reform.
Yes.
Can you just give us an update? That seemed to have gone on the back burner some.
Well, it's not on the back burner because we continue to make, you know, adjustments to the way we do certain things in the public service. I think last time we got together, we talked about shortening the recruitment period and looking at the process for that. And I'm pleased to say that, you know, that is now it's not always practiced, but it is held as a standard. There are other things as well, that we're clearing backlogs, for example, in the naturalization process and the applications that come in for permanent residence. There's been a huge result in clearing the backlogs there, because that is something that I think is raised by the public sometimes, is, why is it taking so long, or why haven't I heard? So I'm very pleased to say that we put things into place. There are a number of other things that we can do without changing legislation, but just tightening our procedures. And I would mention a couple of things. One is the whole grievance procedure, which, even though we have a fairly well-defined procedure, that people don't really know it or follow it. And so tightening that up, what is the procedure that we follow through grievances? Because, as you know, people tend to turn very quickly to lawyers. And you hear a lot about people who say, well, nobody's listening to me. So we do have a process, and we need just to make it clearer and tighten it, and to make sure everybody practices it. And that also applies to disciplinary procedures. So we are making those changes, those differences that do make a difference. But as I've said, there needs to be a comprehensive sort of game change. And it's not just me that's said this, by the way. So many people have said it to me since I've come. And they say it to me because they see me as the person ultimately responsible for the quality of the public service. And I'm not shirking that responsibility. I do have some ideas about how we can do this in a fairly comprehensive way. I hope in the coming weeks, once we've sort of sorted out how that could work, what the mechanisms are for that, I hope to be able to really announce something quite concrete about that. I just want to say to the public and the civil servants who have raised this, is that, I do hear this. I am taking this to heart. I am making, with colleagues, changes. But I do recognize that, given the fact that the public service is the key, not only the key employer, half of the working age population is the public service, but it also drives the economy. So we need to be the drivers of the economy in a positive way, and making the public service work better, but also a better place for people to work in. I think one of the things that I've noticed is the need for people to be empowered, the people who have the responsibility and the capacity to really be empowered, and so it's those kinds of things that we'll be looking at in this suite, if you like, of changes that we'd like to go forward with. And I should say, when I say we, I'm also talking about doing that in concert with the government, but also looking to the public and various parts of the public to be participants in an advisory way of how we might go ahead with that. So watch this space, as I said before.
I know that you spoke also of support in terms of legislation, support to the legal department.
Yes.
Are you getting that support?
Yes. So drafters, really, that's what it is, because we have the Public Administration Act, which has been passed by the legislature. It's signed into law. People do feel that they need regulations for it. There is not everybody thinks that we need a full suite of regulations, that because it's quite an explicit act, that some parts of it can just be administered. But we are going ahead. There has been support provided to the chambers, the Attorney General's chambers, for drafting. I've impressed upon the Attorney General, and he agrees, as well as the Deputy Governor, that this is a priority to get these regulations in place and before Cabinet and so on in good order, because I understand that we've been saying for what, 3 years, ever since the act was passed, which was 2014, so 2 years, that we can't, we can't sort of move forward without the regulations, so we must have those regulations. Yeah.
And we are running out of time.
Yes.
2 more questions. Well, one for you and one for Martin.
Okay.
Child safeguarding.
Yes.
I know that there's been some work ongoing
Yeah.
in terms of child safeguarding, and you would have touched on some of the areas earlier. Please give us an update.
I will be happy to. The restructuring of the social service department, which is a key part of moving in the capacity for child safeguarding, is underway. It's been reviewed. Cabinet has agreed it, and that includes the establishment on a pilot basis of a child safeguarding unit. Now, that's all well and good. The budget's there. The facilities have been identified. The trick is recruiting the people for the surge capacity for the child safeguarding unit, because we do not have qualified social workers on the island. We have a lot of people that are studying, that are moving into those positions, but child social work is a particular specialism. So there is work going on to get the procurement officer, the procurement advisor, is he called, to move on the proposal to recruit these people sort of as a group en masse. So I'm continue to be optimistic that that will happen. However, I have to say that maybe I was naive a few months ago, where I thought, getting agreement that we should go in this direction was a precursor to very quickly getting the thing done. And I can see that that's not the case. It's taken much longer, I think, than certainly I and many other people would wish. But it is moving ahead. And there is, I think, in all of that process of looking at it and looking at our needs, a better understanding and a better commitment to doing something comprehensive on child safeguarding. So I think that commitment is definitely there. It's ready to go. We just have to get the people in.
And Martin, finally, we are basically out of time, but for you to just give us an idea of private sector development, because that was one of the areas that a lot of questions are being focused around in terms of private sector, what is being done to create that environment for private sector development, small
Yes.
and micro businesses and so on.
Well, it's really being led by my colleague Hannes Barenberg, who's leading on that. But I can provide you with a brief update. I know he's been having a lot of detailed conversations with the government, obviously, and also with private sector members here in Montserrat, and he's formulating a business case for support. He hopes to have finalised in the next month or so. Really, with a number of, obviously tourism is a big factor in that, but he's also wanting. It's all about the business environment, the bits around the outside, rather than sort of working directly with companies in the private sector. It's sort of the creating the environment to make, I suppose, Montserrat a more friendly place for investments and to stipulate that it's open for business, and here's the place to come and invest and work in the private sector.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the press conference.